Okay, great. So my topic of today is decoding Laravel mix, and I'll be talking in like simple terms of what is Laravel mix and what is the need of that tool in Laravel and in general. So if you have worked with Laravel, you have seen that we have got two sets of folder here. One is resources and another one is public. And if you expand these two folders, you will find that we have exactly same sets of folder here. One is for CSS and JS here, and another one is for CSS and JS here as well. So what is the need of these two exact same set of folders in these two different directories? So the reason being, this is a folder where you keep your all the complicated JavaScripts of frameworks, that is Vue, React, or whatever framework you're using in the JS. And also if you're using a framework for CSS, that is SAS or less. So the modern browsers, even though there are modern browsers, there are some browsers which will not understand your complicated JS syntaxes, and there is ES 2015 and some import modules and components which won't be understood by the all the browsers. And if you directly try to feed SAS into your website, it won't work. So what your browser need is a simplified format of JavaScript and a simplified format of CSS. And therefore what we do is whatever frameworks and complicated JavaScript and CSS we are writing, we keep it in resources folder. And whenever it gets compiled, it goes into the public folder. So public folder can be accessed by the browser, but resources folder cannot be accessed by the browser. When I say that, whatever files you have here like app.js or app.css, your browser cannot access these files, but your browser can access the files which will be in CSS and JS folder here. This is the way Laravel is configured. So how this works? How do we compile our files from our resources folder, and how does this go into the public folder? This is where Webpack comes into the picture. So if you have worked with Webpack, so this is a tool, Webpack, very famous tool. You must have heard of this. The tool is very simple. So this allows you to compile your scripts, images, and CSS into simplified format. So whatever you feed it, so this is the input, and this image is a a good way to understand Webpack. So this is what you feed into Webpack, and this is what comes out of it. So you can feed any complex JavaScript, your Vue files, your React files, whatever, and your SAS files, less files, and the job of Webpack is to convert it into simplified format of JS and CSS and or the simplified images. So this works great, right? Webpack is the tool that you need. But if you go into the documentation, you will find that it is too complicated for the general use case. If you are into front-end development and you require a lot of configuration, then Webpack is the way to go. But for a backend developer, for a usual asset compilation, we don't need a lot of configuration, and it gets a lot of messier when you try to understand all of these things. There needs to be an entry point, there needs to be an output point, there needs to be a lot of configuration for this stuff. So as always, the job of Laravel for us is to make things simpler. So Laravel and mainly Jeffrey Way came up with a tool called Laravel Mix. So what Laravel Mix is, I'll open its website. So as this is the website of Laravel Mix, and what it says is it's an elegant wrapper around Webpack for the 80% of the use case. What that means is it's a wrapper around Webpack. That means it uses Webpack for the job, and it's for the 80% of the use case. That means for the general use case, 80% of the users, when they only have to do the asset compilation and just go ahead with with their work, then we should use Laravel Mix. And I have found that for a lot of things I have used Laravel Mix, and I haven't found a case when I need to ditch it and go to the Webpack for configuration. So For me, it works for the 100% of the use case. So now we have understood the need of Laravel mix and why we are using it and uh, why we need a wrapper around Webpack. So now we will go into the details of how we can use it. So this is a fresh Laravel project that I have installed in my system. Um, okay, so let's understand how we can bring Laravel mix into the project. By default, Laravel mix is available to you through npm dependency. So if you're not aware of what is npm, so basically, if you have worked with Laravel, you must know what composer is, right? So you have a composer.json file wherein you define all your dependencies for the project. And the job of composer is to download all these dependencies and put them into the project. Similarly, npm is the node package manager. Node, it depends on node, and it gives you a package.json file wherein you define all your dependencies. And once you define all your dependencies, you can run certain commands to download those dependencies for you, and the dependencies will be downloaded in the node underscore modules folder. And since this is a fresh project, I don't have it yet in my folder. So let's go ahead and do that first. So how do you install node dependencies is npm install. By the time this install is going on, does anybody have any confusion over what Laravel mix is, like why we are using it? If yes, you can ask them in the chat section. Okay, so I guess everybody is clear on what Laravel mix is. So we have installed the npm dependencies. So if you go back in the project, we should see a new folder called node modules, and it contains all the dependencies here. Now what we can do is we can go ahead and use Laravel mix. So the entry point of using Laravel mix is this file webpack.mix.js. So this file contains simple commands of what you want mix to do. So if you see here, what we want to do is, I'll just replace it with something we want to do. Okay. So what we are saying to mix here is mix, um, go ahead and compile this file, which is in resources folder. And once the compilation is done, put that in public JS folder. And similarly, compile the app.scss file, and once the compilation is done, put that in public CSS folder. So very simple, no configuration needs to be done. We are just saying mix to compile these files, and we are providing the destination folder of where to keep them. And if you go ahead and resources folder and see what is there in the app.js file, it it is basically requiring a bootstrap JS from here. So we'll not go into the details of this. We'll just start very basic. We just want an alert in our website, and I will create a new file app.scss, and in here we will define some primary color, let's say black, and I will use this as the background color of my body. So very simple JS and very simple SCSS. So now we have written some JS and some SCSS, and I want this to be compiled by mix. So how do we do that? So if you go into your package.json file, you will see that there are certain scripts defined here, and the job of this script is to done the compilation. So we will not go into all of them once. We'll just see what dev command do. So here the dev command is basically npm run development, which is basically running. This is an alias for this command. So we will go ahead and run npm run dev. I think I made a error here. This should be SAS instead of SCSS. Sorry about that. So the first time you run npm run dev command, it needs to get additional dependencies installed for whatever functionality we are doing. So it's currently installing Vue template compiler and the SAS loader. So it's running it by itself. And once that is done, we need to run the npm run dev command again. So this is only for once because we are on a fresh project. Okay, so now it's installed the dependencies and now we can go ahead and run the command again. Okay, so it compiled successfully. It created two assets for us. One is app.css and another one is app.js. So if you go back in the project, you will see that in the public directory, you have a file app.css and app.js. So let's see what is there in those files. So if you open app.js, sorry, this is for resources. If you open app.js, you will see a lot of code, which is basically a building up of what needs to be done for your browser to understand a complex code. But now you will say that for a simple alert, you have converted my one line of code into a 124 lines of code for a simple alert. Sounds rubbish, right? But this isn't for the use case when you're writing a simple alert. This would be for the use case when you're writing thousands lines of code and that needs to be compiled, your Vue.js files and your React files, whatever modules you're trying to write. So when you run those, when you compile those, so this all code is to for the browser to tell that how to execute that code. For in this case, it looks rubbish, but for the majority of your JavaScript code, which you will be writing in like thousands of lines of code, this will make sense. And if you go to the app.css file, you will see that it has compiled our SCSS into the simple CSS. Now, if you want to use these files, so in resources and the view file, we have a single file called welcome.blade.php. So I will link in the new CSS file here, which is basically app.css. And I will also import the script file. Now let's see if we can run this simple alert and we can have this black background in the page. I'll just remove these tailwind so that it won't interfere with the CSS. So we'll run the project. So you see that we have got the alert. So JavaScript is working fine and we have the black background. So the CSS is working fine. So all you need to do is write the complex JS in the resources thing and it will be compiled down for you in the public folder. For now, I have written a very basic CSS in JavaScript, but you get how you would want to use it for the complex CSS and JS and how running a simple command will make the job easier for you. Okay, we'll move ahead and we will see that we have got a complex JS here in our app.js file. So we'll review one more command of npm, which is npm run production. So the first time we ran npm was for the development mode, and now we will show you how you can run the npm for the production mode and what happens when you run the npm for the production mode. Okay, so similar thing happened. It created two files, app.css and js, but in this case, our app.js file is now minified. So whenever you are trying to put your files on the server, after all your development is done, you would run npm run production for the Laravel mix to run the production criteria things. And you can set different criterias. One is basically a minified thing, and apart from this, you can have different criterias for you to be in the production. So when you're compiling your files for the production, and similarly, this is now minified. Now, another use case is you are working on your development project and you are making a lot of changes. And every time you make a change, you would want to run npm run development to compile those changes, right? Because you are importing the compiled files and not these files. And every time you make a change, you would want to run npm run dev. That would be very cumbersome, right? You don't want to put one line of change and keep running the command. So for that, you have a command called npm run watch. What this will do is it will compile your changes once and it will keep watching for the changes that you're making in the resources folder for the assets. And every time you save the changes, it will recompile those. So let's see how this works. So instead of this, I'll run npm run watch. Okay, so now if you see that the command is waiting, it has compiled the changes, but it's waiting. So now if I go back and open my resources css app.css file and change the color from black to red and save the changes, it's you see that I got a command build successful. If I go back and see, now the color is red. So so every time you are in a development cycle, you would run the command npm run watch, and you would just keep the terminal tab open there, and you would start making the changes, and it will automatically pick up the changes and compile those changes for you. And if you made any error in the changes, it would be giving an error message here itself of what exactly you have done wrong in the js or css. So now let's go a step further and see. Now we are able to now the npm Laravel mix is watching our changes, but still we have to refresh the browser every time it makes we make any change, right? What if you want every time you make a change, you don't have to refresh the page, the browser should automatically gets refreshed. So for that, what we have in Laravel mix is browser sync. So what you will do is you will provide an additional command to mix that sync the browser every time you make I make the change. So what you will say is browser sync, and you need to provide a domain name here. So localhost 8000, this is what I'm running my project on, and whatever domain you have, you would provide that here. So since I have done this, I would have to end this thing and would have to run the npm run watch command again. And since we have given a new syntax for mix, it needs to install additional dependencies for that. So it will do that, and then we might need to run the npm run watch command again. Okay, so it installed the dependencies, and now I will run the npm run watch command again. Okay, so it's now watching for the changes. It opened the browser with this specified URL. And now if you see, if I go ahead and change the SCSS, let's change it to yellow. If we go back, you see that I don't have to refresh the browser. It automatically did it for me. So now we are in the complete flow. We are compiling the changes, we are watching it as well, and we don't need to refresh the browser as well. So this is how Mix works. I'll just explain all these, give a brief of what these commands do. So if you see here, we have a development command, right? So when you run npm run development, what it is doing basically is it is executing this command. So you don't need to actually go into the details of what is happening here, but it's better you understand what's going on. So cross environment basically means that Laravel Mix will be able to compile your changes in all the environments like Mac, Linux, or Windows. So this is for that node environment equal to development. So basically it is setting the environment to development. So whatever parameters we have set for development, it will be running those. This needs to be noticed. It is picking up the webpack.js files from the node module. So it in turn has a dependency on Webpack. So basically it is using Webpack for all the stuff, but it is a wrapper around it. So it basically has provided you an easy interface to work with Webpack. This option progress means we want to see the progress when the compilation is being done. Hide modules is we don't want to see the progress of each and every module. And this config is basically from where to pick the configuration. So this is basically from the Laravel mix webpack.config.js file. So this is basically what is happening in the background when we are doing the npm run development command. And similarly for the production, we are setting the environment to production. So this is what Laravel Mix is, and if you are looking to go into the further details of that, there are a lot of options that you can do. I have just covered the basic of JS compilation and CSS compilation, but there is a lot that this tool can do. This tool can do the minification, script combination. So if you have a large number of scripts and you need to combine it into a single file, it can concatenate that. It can version the files for you. It can like do the caching for you. A lot of things can be done and can be explored here. Now an interesting thing that we can cover here is, can Laravel mix be used outside Laravel? So I would say yes, and this is my tool to go when I am working on any kind of project apart from Laravel, also to do my asset compilation. So I'll just give you a brief demo of
Let's
how
say
you
you are
can use
working
Laravel
on
Mix
a
outside Laravel project apart from Laravel, right? You are working on a Bootstrap project, simple HTML project, and you're just using Bootstrap in that. And for that, you want your Bootstrap compilation to be done by Laravel Mix instead of Webpack. And I have found this very useful in my projects, even in WordPress and other PHP projects. I always go for Laravel Mix to compile the assets. So let's say I create a new project called HTML project. And since we want to use Laravel Mix and Bootstrap, which both are npm dependencies, what I would do is I will say npm init. So this basically will convert my project into a node project, so that I can install the node dependencies into it. Now, if I will open this project in the editor, you see currently it's blank. It just contains a file package.json. Now what we need to do is, since we want Bootstrap as the dependency, what I will do is npm install Bootstrap, and I want the latest version, so I'll say next. For Bootstrap, there is a dependency of popper.js, and I want to save it to the as a dev dependency. So this will go ahead and install Bootstrap as a dependency. Next step, I want Laravel Mix to handle this project. So what I will do is npm installed Laravel Mix, and this also I want as a dev dependency. So in Laravel projects, Laravel Mix comes by default, but in another projects, you can install it as a npm dependency. Okay, so Laravel Mix is installed. There is one more step that needs to be done. So once you install Laravel Mix, you need to pick up the configuration file from the node modules folder and copy it into your project folder. So I'll run this command. So now if we go back, we see that we have the node modules and we also have the webpack.mix.js file. So let's do a quick thing. What we are doing here is mix.js is compiling our JS from the source folder and putting it in the dist folder. This is the default command that Mix gives us. And these are all the commands, different commands that you can run with Mix. We're not concerned about these right now. I just want the compilation of JS and CSS. So I will create two new folders. One is source and another one is dist. So this will be my input folder and this will be my output folder. So for the input, I'll create a new file app.js and another one called app.scss. So for in app.js, what I want is to import the bootstrap JS library into the JS file. And for SCSS, I want to import the bootstrap file. I'll just refer to the exact command there. For JS, we have this command, and for the CSS, we have this command. So what we are doing here is we are just importing the bootstrap from the node module. So bootstrap, when you put it as an npm dependencies, it will put everything into the node modules. And if you want to use it, you just need to import it into your project. So what I'm doing here is just importing the bootstrap JS library and importing the bootstrap CSS library. Now what I want to do with Laravel Mix is compile this down to a simple CSS and JS so that my browser understands this. That's what I'm looking for. So what I'll do here is I have done this thing. Now I'll say npm run. So watch. Okay, so one thing we missed out is in the package.json file, you see that currently there are no scripts because we initialize the project with blank thing. There is no scripts to run right now. So what we need to do is we need to go into the Laravel Mix thing and copy all these scripts which will help us to run the Laravel Mix compiler, and we will paste it here. So now we have these commands so that we can run them in our terminal. It will take a few seconds to install the dependencies. Okay, so this is done. I can now run npm run watch. So it has done the compilation. Now if you go back to the editor, you will see that in the dist folder you have two new files, app.css, which is basically the expanded version of your bootstrap, each and every thing of bootstrap css, and in the js we have the bootstrap js. So we have now got what we needed from the Laravel mix. We have the simplified version of js and css. Now I can go ahead and use them in the page. So this is the basic template I have written down for the bootstrap. We'll create a new file, index.html, put it here. We have this dist app.js, and we have uh, I think the layout is messed up. Okay, yeah, and we have this app.css. So now I can run it in the browser. You see that the bootstrap styling is working fine and the JS is working fine as well. So the motive here is to tell that whatever framework you are using, which is using a complex JS or a advanced form of CSS, which is basically SAS or LAS or any types of any framework of CSS, if you are looking to compile it down to simplified CSS or JSS, instead of Webpack, you can go to Laravel Mix, which does the job same and does it effortlessly. You don't have to put any configuration efforts into that. So this is an example of bootstrap thing. I can show you in another example which I am using in my live WordPress project. So those of you who are aware with WordPress, you might be knowing that there are a lot of JS and CSS files that goes into the browser, and each one of them takes time to load, and that increases the page load time, right? So wherever in your project you have like 10 or 12 JS files, and it every time you want to load that file, it hits the server and it takes additional time to download it from the server, right? So I was facing the same issue in my WordPress project. So what I did is I used Laravel. I converted this into an npm repository, this themes folder. So in the package.json file, I have now Laravel mix as the dependency. Once I have this, I defined in the webpack.mix.js file that I don't want any compilation to be done. What I was looking for is just the concatenation and minification of the files. So if you see here, what I have done here is not written JS or SCSS. What I have written here is styles and scripts. What these command do is just concatenate all these files and minify it for the production. So I was using these 6 files for my CSS and this 7 or 8 files for the JS. So I have given it to Laravel Mix, concatenate it for me and minify it for me. So the result is you will see that whatever I am giving it to it here, the output is in this folder. So if you go here, for all these things, I have a single minified file for the CSS and the single minified file for the JS. So this is how you can use Laravel Mix in any of your project for the minification and concatenation of the JS and CSS files. I guess this is what all I had to show in this demo. There is a lot that can be covered for the Laravel Mix. It's a very good tool, and I guess it's underrated. People haven't discovered much of what its capabilities outside Laravel. Because the name is Laravel Mix, people confuse it that it can only be used in Laravel projects. So yeah, that's all I have got today.